Well, telemedia, almost anything to do with telemedia. And him over there, my number one wordsmith, Paul Skeldon, he's the man who sticks all of those wonderful words of wisdom into all of those fantastic telemedia channels that we lovingly nurture throughout the year. We're going to spend the next few minutes picking out some of the top stories from this week's telemedia news and diving a little bit deeper. We're going to be starting off by talking about conversational commerce and e-commerce and how the two are coming together. It may appear to be something that is a recurring theme, but I think when we go into some of the research that's come from Juniper, you'll see why we're touching on it again this week. We're then going to talk about regulation, content monitoring and moderation. Don't worry, we'll make it interesting because I know that can be a bit of a switch off, but a word of warning to some of the UK businesses that still don't think that anything to do with EU regulation is anything to do with them. It's a mistake, I'm telling you. And then we're going to finish up with a really interesting story about how core telemedia companies are changing or adopting interesting strategies when it comes to mergers and acquisitions. And I also want to say, Paul, I've been listening to lots of podcasts over the last 2 weeks, which means that my style, I'm hoping, will be infinitely more professional than it has.
Excellent. Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. Yes, I haven't been listening to as many podcasts as you, so mine, I imagine, will be its usual fairly amateurish self.
Well, I'm trying to come up to your standards. I mean, one of the things I have learned is it is always nice to have a reason every 2 weeks to actually get dressed and put on a decent shirt. So without further ado, Paul, firstly, how's your week been? How are you doing, mate?
It's been good. It's been good. It's busy. It's busy. We've had snow. We've had sunshine. We've had all sorts going on, but that's largely kept me inside scanning the news. And there's much to report, as ever. Actually, every fortnight there's much to report when we do this. So things have moved on a pace. So yes, all good here. Looking forward to being let out of the house now and making some sort of inroads into a normal life.
Well, before you do that, let's talk about conversational commerce, which is apparently going to deliver $290 billion globally by 2025. And this is coming from another report from those fantastic guys over at Juniper called Conversational Commerce, a Market Outlook, Emerging Opportunities and Forecasts 21 to 25. They start from by saying that conversational commerce is worth 41 billion now, set to go to 290 billion in just 5 years. And some interesting analysis there that perhaps we haven't seen from some of the conversational commerce champions like Centilli. So this puts a research spin on it. Tell us what you thought about that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, I thought, because we've been talking about conversational commerce for well over a year now. I mean, we've been sort of moving towards it, I think, for some time, but we've been talking specifically about conversational commerce as a thing for over a year, and now obviously it's reached the mainstream with the likes of Juniper actually looking at what it's worth and where it's going. So that was the first reason that I thought this was interesting. I think the predictions of how large it's going to be are also quite interesting too. 290 billion by 2025 is that's a lot of money. However, I think well, the Juniper report does go into a lot of areas, as you say, that we haven't sort of explored as much in this area, like sort of chatbots and the sort of regional differences we're going to see and which apps are driving this. What I think is perhaps possibly missing from this is the fact that I think we're going to see a lot more of a role for telemedia companies, especially those that are sort of building these sort of content platforms as a service idea to service conversational commerce, getting more into e-commerce, which of course is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Now, obviously, we're not going to see all of that money coming through sort of telemedia billing and marketing channels, but I think it's got a big chunk that it can take from that. And we talked last time on this about the deal Democo did with Sign to sort of do direct bank transfers via e-commerce. And we've also talked a few months ago about Democo making mobile network operators in Germany payment agents. Now, what all this means is that suddenly that particular company is able to offer quick, seamless, frictionless mobile payments for real world goods, which opens it up to proper e-commerce, not just sort of digital e-commerce. And I think combining that with the power of RCS messaging and chatbots and all the other things that Juniper rightly bring out in their report makes this a really big and interesting play. And I think this is a significant moment in the sort of telemedia journey, because it suddenly is now on the brink of doing something, quite a leap by a factor of many tenfold in terms of the size of the market and the revenues that these companies can now handle and the kind of companies they're going to work with.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, on that Democo story, because we did, as you say, it was hot off the press last time we spoke, so we didn't. I know you hadn't really had a chance to dive deeper, and I've had another look at that, and it did sort of occur to me. One of the themes that you will often bring up is how you feel that the MNOs are sort of always a little bit behind the curve, which is a sort of constant frustration for the industry, for a whole range of different applications. But what it seems to me as though with the Democo and the deal that they've done with SignD, using the banks and using the phone to authenticate the bank transfer, it's really the banks have just stepped in, and it's like direct carrier billing, only with a bank instead of a mobile network operator. And if that, with all the same benefits that DCB has, and if that really catches on, this could be another huge own goal for the MNOs, who have, arguably not been as proactive as they should have been for DCB, right?
I think so. I think that's a very good point. And for something to move slower than a bank, it's a bit sort of like a bit unusual and a bit depressing. But yes, I mean, I think network operators shouldn't give them too much of a kicking. It is difficult to proceed with these things, and I think many network operators don't see this as their core business, obviously. But I think if we do see this shift into telemedia type things and mobile payments, frictionless mobile payments is what we're really after. Forget the idea of DCB or how it happens. What we're really looking for is frictionless mobile payments, particularly directly from mobile messaging and mobile engagement. If it gets into the e-commerce world and becomes the way people pay for stuff, like they increasingly do with WeChat in China, which is now one of the biggest brands in the world and bigger than 3 massive banks in China in terms of its size and market capitalization. If it gets into these sorts of things, then it's suddenly going to be much more important to network operators. So I think, they need to take heed now that this is going in that direction.
Well, going back to that Juniper report, and they talk about China, Japan, and South Korea really leading the way, and how, because they're already so far advanced with the sort of chatbot back-end technology, that they reckon that 145 billion is going to be processed by 2025 using chatbots, which will represent probably about 90% of that particular sector. So yeah, I mean, that's obviously an interesting indicator. And I think also, with going back to that Juniper report, it's the first time with regards to conversational commerce we talked about, or they really identified, revenue share opportunities, which of course is a business model which has underpinned the telemedia sector from day one, really. So lots to be quite optimistic about, I think, there.
Absolutely. Which brings us neatly, I'm going to ring my little bell for our next story.
Well, hold on a second, because that's not really fair, because I should have the bell. I just wanted to say that if you're interested, if any of our viewers, and some of them are live, Paul, we're actually now going live.
We are live, yes, we're live on YouTube.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, YouTube.
There are a couple of very interesting sessions on the Telemedia 8.1 platform deal with conversational comments. Oh, there are more than 2, but I picked out 2 in particular. One is RCS messaging, enabling brands to monetize, which is hosted by the wonderful Nick Millwood, who's the VP of Engage, if they're still called Engage, because they got bought the other day. The other one is commerce on messaging platforms, which is my good self talking to Oliver Latant, the COO at Centillion. He certainly knows his way around CC. And there's also this very week a fantastic Meet the People interview, which is currently in the news section of Telemedia Online, and you can also find a link to that on my LinkedIn profile posting from the previous week. And it's an interview with Dina Yavensky Farasic. I really hope I got that right. She's the SVP of marketing at Centilli. And I was struck. It was so good to see her listed in the top 50 women in fintech. And, again, brilliant company, super generous in terms of her knowledge. And that interview, unsurprisingly, has already hit nearly 2,000 views on LinkedIn, which is fantastic. And she touches on some of the hot markets, some of the hot applications. She obviously references the CPaaS and MPaaS trend that we're seeing in terms of their strategy, talks about DCB and, of course, Centilli's position with conversational commerce. So I would urge you to go and read that interview and check out those two sessions and more on the Telemedia 8.1 platform. So I think
before I ring the bell, I was just going to say it's interesting that she's listed the top 50 women in fintech.
Fintech, exactly.
Yeah, so very good point. Right, shall I ring the bell?
Ring the bell.
Okay. And our next story, which is sort of related, actually, about the Digital Services Act.
Yes. We've never done it like that before. The bells.
We haven't. The bells thrown, but this is live TV, Jarvis. We must soldier on.
Adapt. Okay, so usually a bit of a yawner, but regulation, monitoring, content moderation is super important. And if you're not on top of the regulation, you're going to be in trouble, particularly if you're a UK business. And this story, 1 in 4 UK businesses worried about complying with EU online safety regulations. This is referencing the Digital Services Act, which comes into force later this year, which is, on the face of it, doing a great thing protecting online consumers from harmful content. But Paul, it's significant implications for UK businesses that aren't on the board.
Well, it's got interesting implications, I think, for all businesses. For all businesses, you could just end it there, but particularly in our industry, because it's the EU seeking to regulate what goes on the internet. Now, it's nothing to do with digital sales tax, which is about taxing big tech, Amazon, Apple, those sorts of people. But I think it's related because it's another prong. The EU is going to war on big digital, I think. They're trying to level the playing field, quite rightly maybe, for smaller players to come in. But it throws up all these ideas of what this is going to actually police. It's meant to protect consumers, and it's meant to make it fairer for smaller startups to operate within the digital world in Europe. Now, it seeks to sort of police everything. It's very vague. There's a load of stuff about it on the EU's website, which I read this morning, which took me hours. And I realized by the time I got to the end, I don't really know that much more about it by the time I got to the end than I did when I started. But it's a putative thing that's being worked on as we speak. But it seeks to regulate how content and services and stuff that's sold is all regulated, so that it's not they're not selling illegal stuff. It's not sort of damaging. It's all those sort of things that we worry about, particularly as parents, about what the internet could do to our children. We think, but that is such a massive undertaking and almost impossible to do. To get 27 different governments to agree, it is going to be really hard. And I do fear that it's either going to be rushed through and be a bit of a fudge that will have loads of holes in it and we won't really know what we're doing, or it's just going to take forever to ever actually be knocked into shape and implemented, by which time everything has moved on. I think what's interesting in light of what we're talking about just now about conversational commerce is that the conversational commerce thing has become a massive opportunity for the companies in Telemedia and elsewhere. And quite rightly, they're throwing a lot into it. They're growing. It's taking off. This could possibly put a bit of a kink in its gallop and slow it down, should the rules be a little bit difficult. Now, it's hard to say because we don't know where this is going just yet. But I think it's well worth flagging it up to all our lovely audience out there that this is something you really probably need to look at perhaps more carefully than you might have thought initially. I think because it could have massive implications, or it could have none. But I think it's going to be quite a difficult thing for people. For UK companies, the story we put up this morning is more to do with the fact that you have to take note of this, even though it's an EU regulation. It applies to any website that operates in a European country. Now, as far as I can gather, that's like anyone who's got a website. It's accessible from Europe. So you have to be mindful of this, and it will have an impact on you. And not being part of the EU, we don't get a say in what these rules are. So yeah, it's one really I wanted to flag this up now, because I think it could, you know, have an impact on conversational commerce in particular. It'll have an impact on everything that's done online, including e-commerce. And I think it's something that we as an industry need to start looking at and thinking about right now before it gets sort of, you know, is suddenly put in place and we don't really know how that impacts us.
Yeah. So, well, what I wanted to ask you really was whether or not, I mean, if you drill down into that simple statistic, and I know you're not one for figures, mate, but 1 in 4, that's 25% of companies are worried about the implications of this act, which specifically protects online users from harmful content. Now, that sort of suggests that the definition of harmful content within that act means that 1 in 4 companies is putting harmful content on the internet, which clearly can't really be the case, right?
No, but that's the thing. It covers all sorts of other things other than harmful content in terms of, you know, sort of pornography or illegal goods and things like that. It covers sort of things that are just unfair. And it also, interestingly, which we need to do a bit more research into this, I have to say, but I noticed not long before we came on air that it also covers the use of algorithms in marketing. Now, this has become a bit of a sort of pet subject of mine of late here in the Skeldon household, but there's an excellent documentary on Netflix called Coded Bias, which is about algorithms and how they are biased and the terrible things they can do. There's also another documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, which also touches on the power of algorithms and the power of artificial intelligence. And I think this act seeks to try in some way and temper that. Now, that's a big undertaking. Now, I wonder if whether these 25% of companies who are worried about it are not worried about it because they're all doing illegal things. It's because of they might be the 25% who have looked at this and read the entire massive document, got to the end and thought, well, our algorithms might come under that. And so that's why they're concerned.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I'd also throw a documentary called Hypernormalization in there as well. Also talks about the road to the algorithm. So there you go. There's a bit of background.
They're really well. They're worth watching. They're good. Yeah. All 3 of those documentaries are really good, and they really made me think.
Well, I'll tell you what else is worth watching, Paul. If you go back to, forget Netflix, go to Telemedia 8.1, because this particular story also talks about, you know, the implied importance of content moderation. And there's an excellent session called Marketing and Product Development, which, you know, this was done a few weeks just before Christmas by Anastasia Belus, the COO of New Media Services. And that's a session which, you know, talks about how, you know, technology is essential now in terms of monitoring content, because it is a much bigger task than it ever was, you know, back in the days when life was much simpler. So we need
also, but that throws up like the algorithms and AI that's watching the content. How do we, you know, how does it decide what's good for me and not good for me? It's a thorny subject. I think something that probably will eventually need regulating, but whether the EU is the body to do that, I don't know.
Ring the bell, Paul. Okay, so finally, it's been an interesting 12 months in terms of mergers and acquisitions. We predicted back, you know, before Christmas that we're going to see more of it, and goodness me, this year has been just non-stop. It's been a spending spree. This particular acquisition interested me enormously. Infobip has acquired Europe's largest tech conference. No, it's not World Telemedia, it's Shift. And what they've done is they bought this conference with a view to creating a developer experience department within Infobip while still running these conferences. So what were your observations on this one, Paul?
Well, yeah, it appeared as a sort of, you know, minor but interesting story that was worth putting up on the website because it was about Infobip, which is, you know, as you say, one of the sort of great telemedia players. But sort of going through it and doing a bit more research while writing the story, I think this is really quite an unusual and quite an interesting development. It's bought a developer conference, basically. I think it's trying to create sort of not just the products that it sells, but a whole sort of kind of developer ecosystem and environment to sort of encourage, you know, more development of great services. It's a bit like the sort of, you know, Apple basically is the company that does this sort of thing. It's that sort of idea. I thought, you know, no disrespect to Infobip, but they're a lot smaller than Apple. We think, you know, good on you for having this sort of vision to create something more than just being a sort of product and service company, to actually look at how that can work with development and creating the next sort of level of content and services. Yeah. And again, it brings in sort of working with fintech and AI and all that kind of stuff, which is, you know, back neatly to where we started our live broadcasts today. In that it's really shifted in the past few months. This whole industry has really shifted into a different place. Yeah. And I think this is a wonderful example of a company doing something really quite creative with its M&A strategy, and you know, it's one to watch. Be really interested to see where this goes, because I think some really interesting stuff could come out of this.
Well, you know what, Paul, I mean, we need to go, because I can see that my phone is buzzing, and I imagine that there's all manner of payment gateways, service providers, aggregators, content owners that are just looking to pick up a trade event with a media service that would just be such a great. That what they could do is I noticed that Ivan Berzin, who's from Shift, has joined Infobip with the best name ever.
Hasn't he?
Chief Developer Experience Officer, the CDO.
Brilliant, isn't it?
Oh, I just loved it. Chief Developer Experience. So I thought, if indeed, you know, I accept any of the offers that are no doubt going to be flooding in after this, I could be head of e-commerce regulation, payment and entertainment services, or herpes for short. So anyway, but I mean, it's up for negotiation, Paul.
I think that's the one. Well, you know, we've been doing this for 20 we've been doing this for 25 years. Maybe this is it. Yeah, all for sale.
Right. Listen,
I'm thrown in free like a lucky gonk.
You just ruined the deal. Okay, mate. Listen.
Well, I don't have to be thrown in for free. I can just be crying on the outside the office of whoever buys it.
We'll pay you wherever everyone's got a price. Listen, mate. Thanks very much. I'm going
to ring my bell one more time, just for the hell of it.
See you later, everyone.
Take care, everyone.